Story time about how my boyfriend faked his own death so that he wouldn't have to break up with me. His mom called me to tell me that he was dead. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I was sending on Instagram. My boyfriend and I had been dating for 3 years. Our relationship was really only based on attraction, I have to admit. But the last year we started getting a little bit more serious, and that's when we started talking about marriage. By the way, he was the one that brought up marriage. He asked me if I could see myself getting married to him, and I said yes. Now here's the thing. I am way out of his league. Like, way out of his league. I'm a 10, he's probably like a 6. Here's my theory. If you date a guy that's not as good looking as you, he probably won't cheat on you and will consider himself lucky to be with you. So that was my reason for being in a relationship with him. He made me feel safe, and I knew that he probably wouldn't cheat on me, and he felt lucky to be with me because I'm really hot. Eventually, he asked me to move in, and I said yes. But after a few weeks, he started acting really strange. He constantly complained about having headaches, and for some reason would always have his mom over at our place. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my boyfriend faked his own death to not have to break up with me, and even got his mom to call me to tell me that he was dead. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's on Instagram. After we moved in together, that's when everything changed. He always complained about having headaches, and would always bring his mom over like every single day. At first, this annoyed me because all I really wanted was some privacy with my boyfriend, but then I kind of just learned to deal with it. And here's when things get really crazy. After exactly 1 month of living together, he disappeared. One morning, he left to work and simply did not come back. I kept calling his phone, but no answer. I even called his mom and asked him what was up, and she told me that she didn't know where he was. Finally, after 2 days of calling his phone, I decided to go over to his mom's house. I asked her if he'd been home, and she told me that she hadn't seen him in 3 days. But her behavior was super strange. She got really nervous and tried to close the door behind her. I asked her who was inside the house, and she said nobody. But I could hear someone making noise. Then she basically kicked me out. She told me I needed to leave really quickly because she had to go out. So of course, I went back to my apartment. 2 hours later, she calls me to tell me that he's dead. I asked her where he was. She told me that he didn't know and that she didn't know how he died. She asked me not to call her again because it was too painful. Part 3 is story time about how my boyfriend faked his own death so that he wouldn't have to break up with me, and got his mom to tell me that he was dead. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. After she told me on the phone that my boyfriend was dead, I had no choice but to believe her. I was so sad and depressed, sitting in the apartment that I share with my dead boyfriend. I called my parents and told them I was coming home. I spent the next 4 days with my parents and eventually went back to my apartment. My plan was to get all of his stuff and give it to his mom. I show up to her house with the boxes and knock on the door. She opens the door with a huge smile on her face, and as soon as she realizes it's me, she stopped smiling. I asked her if she was okay, and she said that everything was fine. She asked me what I wanted in a really rude tone, and I said, I'm just bringing some of your son's stuff. She asked me to leave it outside and then close the door. I knocked on the door again, and she did not open the door. A few days later, I go to the mall, and guess who I see walking around? My dead boyfriend? I run up to him and ask him what happened. That's when he confessed that he just didn't know how to break up with me, and he thought that the best way to do it was just to pretend that he was dead. And he also confessed that he met someone. Here I'm thinking I'm way too hot for him to cheat on me. Yeah, right. It's been a few months now, and he's hitting me up again because he broke up with the other girl. Should I take him back? Should I break up with my boyfriend for fat shaming me? My boyfriend and I started dating 2 years ago. At the beginning of our relationship, I was weighing 130 pounds. So back then, he never had a problem with my weight. In fact, he used to praise me and tell me that he loved my body. He always would tell me that my curves were sexy, and I would sometimes tell him that I wanted to lose weight, but he would always say no. In fact, a few months after we started dating, I went on a diet. I lost about 5 pounds in 2 weeks, and he told me that I needed to stop. He told me he liked my womanly body. So I stopped dieting. At first, I was happy that he loved my body so much, but at the same time, I didn't feel healthy, which is why I started the diet in the first place. After I stopped the diet, I still kept on eating healthy, with the exception that every now and then we would have pizza or fast food. But I still tried to keep it to a minimum. So my boyfriend is actually in the Marines, and he had to go away for a few months. This sent me into a depression because I missed him so much. And because of that, I started eating a lot. I would ask my mom to cook me my favorite meals, and I would basically just eat all day. At the time, I also didn't have a job, so that was making me depressed as well. So I ended up gaining 40 pounds. Part 2 is up. Should I break up with my boyfriend for fat shaming me? After he told me I looked disgusting, I instantly broke out into tears. That's when he said, "What did you expect?" Then he said, "I've been away for months. The last thing I want to come home to is a huge gut." But then I started crying more, and he kind of softened up. He said that we could work out together and that he could help me lose the weight. He then pulls up his phone and shows me a picture of what he thinks I should look like. It was basically some random Instagram model that he followed, who was actually way skinnier than I was when he first met me. For the next week, he barely touched me, and he would make little snide remarks every time he saw me eating. For example, one night we decided to watch a movie at my place. I asked him if he wanted any snacks, and he said no. Then I told him I was probably gonna make some popcorn and if he wanted any. That's when he said I needed to watch what I was eating, especially at night, and that the last thing I needed was snacks during a movie. This obviously hurt my feelings. And of course, I started dieting again. But this time I was even more strict about it. I basically cut out every single thing that I like to eat, and I was only eating lean meats and salad, but very little portions. One night he invited his friends to come over to watch a football game. Instead of me having to cook, I offered to order them pizza and they said yes. When the pizzas finally arrived, my boyfriend said in front of everybody, "You don't get to eat any pizza because you still need to lose weight." I was so horrified, mortified, I wanted to literally crawl under a rock and die. His friends started laughing because they actually thought it was a joke. Then he says, "No, you guys, I'm serious. She's so fat." I couldn't believe my boyfriend was putting me down like that in front of his friends. I gave him the silent treatment, but he really didn't care. After a full month, I started finally losing weight. It's been 3 months now, and I'm weighing 120 pounds. Now he's all over me and constantly tells me that I look beautiful. But I'm never gonna forget how he treated me when I was heavier. I know that I should break up with him because of how he treated me, but I really do love him. And he's back to normal now. He loves me and touches me all the time. What should I do? Part 2 of how I dated my 30-year-old teacher when I was 15. Disclaimers is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. Sometimes he would flirt with me and then I would flirt back. But trust me, I never thought anything would actually happen. And like I said, he was becoming my best friend. He would give me all this advice and try to help me out. But then right after, he would say something flirty. One day he saw me having lunch by myself and asked me if I wanted to have lunch with him in his classroom. Of course I said yes. I mean, I did have a crush on this guy. As we're sitting in his classroom, we're just talking like friends. And that's when he starts asking me about boys. I told him I didn't like anyone and this clearly made him happy. That's when he came to sit right next to me and told me that he had a confession to make, that he actually had a crush on me. And I got so happy. I mean, obviously, I was a girl in high school who liked a guy and he liked her back. It was like the best news in the world. Then he told me that he wished he could kiss me, but he knew he couldn't in class. Then he said, "Why don't you come over to my house later?" And I was like, okay, sure. Please don't ever do what I did. He picked me up a block away from school and we went to his house. And as you can imagine, things went down. Literally. I fell in love with this man that very same day. For the next 2 weeks, I went to his house every day. Then he asked me to be his girlfriend and I said yes. This is when things started to get really scary. He became really jealous and controlling. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how I dated my 30-year-old teacher when I was only 15. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I mean on Instagram. Once he asked me to be his girlfriend and I said yes, he totally changed. He became controlling and really jealous. Anytime he saw me talking to any boy in school, he would actually send the guy to detention. Eventually, I told him that I didn't want to be his girlfriend anymore because of how controlling he was. That's when he told me that I needed to learn how to be an adult, and that all adult relationships were like that. That women had to follow the men's rules, and that if I wanted to be in a relationship with him, that's what I had to do. I was so naive that I actually believed him. So after that, I would try to avoid anything that would make him upset. Basically, talking to any boys. Remember I said I had a group of friends? He told me I couldn't hang out with them anymore. He also wouldn't let me go to parties, and anytime we were alone, he would always try to kiss me even if I didn't want him to. In total, we were probably officially boyfriend and girlfriend for only 3 weeks. I was getting so tired of it. Told him I didn't want to be with him and that I was not going to be in his class anymore. He tried to grab my arm, but before he could, I ran away from his class. And after that, he started begging me to get back with him. So here's what I did. I got another boyfriend a few weeks later, and he basically left me alone after that. To this day, I've never told anyone this story. Part of me feels guilty that I never said anything, but I'm pretty sure he didn't do it to anyone else. After I broke up with him, he moved to a small island and worked at a hotel. I'm now 25 and married. Not even my husband knows. Should I tell him? Am I the asshole for cheating on my husband with his brother? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. So his brother moved in with us during quarantine. And as soon as he moved in, I was finally laughing and having fun. Like I said, my husband was really boring and shy. So you can imagine, like, even in bed, he was super boring. Like, he never wanted to do it. And if I ever asked him to, he would just say he was tired. So I got really sick of that. When his brother came to live with us, he would make jokes, we would laugh. He basically made me feel alive again. Here's how things went down with him. My husband loves to go golfing with his golfing buddies. So he would leave every single day for like 2 to 3 hours just to do that. So I was pretty much all by myself all day. He would also spend a lot of time where he worked at a hospital. On the other hand, his brother was home all the time. He and I would watch movies. He even started helping me out with my online business. And soon we became really good friends. I would tell him everything. I would even complain about how boring his brother was. One night we decided to have pizza and wine. And between us, we both had 3 bottles. Throughout the movie, we kept laughing. And every time I would just get closer and closer to him. Eventually, I was sitting right next to him. That's when we look at each other and we just started macking on. It was uncontrollable passion and I didn't know how to stop. And we ended up doing it. Part 3 is up. Am I the asshole for cheating on my husband with his brother? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. As we were making out on the couch, I just kept thinking how much better my life would be with him, as opposed to his boring brother. One thing led to another and we ended up doing it. And it was magical. And then every single day after that, we would kind of just smile at each other. When my husband was at home, he would steal kisses from me. If I was sitting on a chair, he would come by and quickly tickle my shoulder. I was living like a full-on romance novel. Of course, my boring husband didn't even notice. I was suddenly happy all the time. One day I asked my husband if he had noticed the change in question me, and he said, "You're being silly. What are you talking about?" And right there, that confirmed that my husband didn't even care that I was suddenly happier. He wasn't even bothering to ask why. Either way, his brother was staying with us until he found his own house. And guess what? He ended up moving in 2 houses away from ours. By the way, he also owns his own businesses, so he's really wealthy. He's tried to convince me to leave his brother, but I don't know. Sometimes I think my husband doesn't really like women, but I'm not sure. I know you guys will think it's easy to just get a divorce, but I don't want to break his heart either. But at the same time, I want to be happy too. What should I do? Help! Storytime about how I married my father. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, and trigger warning for this. When I turned 19 is when my dad and I started spending more time together alone. Or should I say my husband? Keep in mind, I really didn't have a relationship during my teen years. We only spoke on the phone a few times, and he would visit every now and then, but not a lot. When I turned 19, I was living in college and I was closer to my dad. So I decided to reach out to him and ask him if he wanted to have dinners every now and then, and he said yes. The first time we went out to dinner, we actually had a lot of fun, and it really didn't feel like I was hanging out with my dad. It was more like I was hanging out with a friend. We just didn't have that father-daughter dynamic. We would meet up almost every single weekend, and our relationship was actually very friendly. We would make each other laugh and talk about everything. And this is when we realized that we had a lot in common. Eventually, he asked me if I was dating anyone, and I told him I wasn't. When I got home, I started realizing that I wasn't thinking about my dad like a dad. I was thinking about him like a man. So the next time I saw him, I decided to tell him that. And that's when he told me that he didn't see me like a daughter either. It took a lot of courage for me to tell him this. So that's when things started to really change between us. Every time we would hang out after that, it was more like a date. We started getting to know each other, and he would hold my hand every now and then. And a few weeks later, we had our first kiss. Part 3 is up! Storytime about how I dated my 30-year-old teacher when I was only 15. Disclaimer, this is not my storytime. I said I'm on Instagram. When I was 14, my dad got a new job and we moved to a different state. This was terrible for me because I left all of my friends, my family, and my entire life. And I knew that going to a new school at 14 years old was going to be really hard. Basically starting from scratch. I really resented my dad for it, although looking back on it, I was being a total brat. My dad's job was paying him $200,000 a year. And obviously, I didn't recognize this as a good thing. My mom and dad were incredibly happy about this. We got a really big house with a pool, a tennis court, a gym, and my parents were the happiest I'd ever seen them. But this upset me even more. So me being a bratty teenager, I decided to make their lives impossible. I started staying out late even though I didn't have friends. And when I started making friends at this new school, I befriended the wrong ones. I even started drinking. My drama class was the only one that I ever looked forward to and really had fun in. And this is where I met the guy that would become my boyfriend. The thing was, he was actually really attractive. He felt like another student in the class, and he made sure to be friends with every single student. Because I was new, he made an effort to get to really know me. Of course, looking back, I realized that this was grooming. No, I don't want to say the word. And then he would flirt with me and I would flirt back. Part 2 is up.